Do you need a Revenant starter and build guide that gets you insane damage and great support? I'm going to go over the best weapons, the relics, how everything scales, what works with Revenant, what you should be looking for on each and every single run, and how to make her insanely OP early on. What's up world, it's Utopia here back in with another video. Today we're checking out all things Elden Ring Nightreign. Okay, so let's just get into the build. Let's first off go into the relics, what you should be looking for, what you can use earlier on, depending on if you don't have any of the remembrance levels. Also go into an end game build and an early game build. Then we'll get into the weapons, how everything scales, what works with her, what secondary weapon attributes do and don't work, which ones scale, and how to have a nice little cheat sheet so that you know exactly what to look for on each and every run. Okay, so first off, for our relics and our starting relic, now these can depend on your playstyles and also depending on what weapons you're going to be using. If you're going to use her Revenant Claw or the claw that she starts with, it actually is very good. It is an S tier in scaling, meaning that more than likely you can just use that one. If you're not going into any of the meme specs with the colossal weapons or anything of that nature, then you can just stick with that as long as you do get upgrade materials throughout. Obviously, you should be hitting dungeons and mines there. First off, for the starter one here, now this will require a little bit of the remembrance, but there are things you can substitute in the meantime here. So again, these are the relics that you more than likely will be gearing towards end game, at least with the starting weapon, or at least the one that you're always going to want to use, which is the claw. Again, you don't have to use the weapon, but if you are utilizing that, this is more than likely what you're going to want to run. Where if we do see here, the old portrait you're going to get from Remembrance Chapter 7 once you do clear basically the entire story. The small makeup brush is going to be from Chapter 1, which is just defeating the first boss. And then Knight of the Wise is what you're going to get from the Sentient Past Night Lord. Now this one is, again, what you're going to want to start with, or at least if you are using that starting weapon, as your starting armament will inflict poison, and poison and rotten vicinity will increase your attack power. So it's going to make this weapon really, really strong off the bat, as it is your starting weapon there. And if you're going to stick with it and upgrade it through the process, then that is what I would go with. However, if you want to go into meme specs and you want to actually use a weapon or a different weapon, again, we're going to go over weapons in a bit here, but this is what I would actually switch out for, which is the old pocket watch, where you get FP restoration upon successive attacks with a +3 dexterity. It's really not as easy to find FP restoration on a lot of things, although you can, though. There are chances that you can find FP restorations, but it will be weapon dependent. This one is on successive attacks, so it doesn't matter what weapon you're using, but this is what I would use, as we're going to lean into seals with this build and incantations overall. I've seen a lot of people that say that you can't use seals and incantations. I don't believe in that. There is a ton of seals and incantations you can use that do a ton of damage, and you can really output before you even have to even get near melee. And so we can lean into that with this build as well, but this also provides dexterity, which will help with a few weapons, and you can also get some FP restoration there. Again, dependent on what weapon you're going to use, this one doesn't really lock you into a weapon. You can go with colossal weapon attack power. There are a few additional things that we'll look into there. Or if you are looking at starter relics, again, I'll go over some in my inventory, but there are some here. You have +2 faith. If you could find a +2 or +3 faith, that's good for early spells. That'll give you about a 3 or 4% damage increase there. You can use some FP stuff here if you wanted to, some plus FP, which will give you some additional casting there. Now jumping over to some of mine here, like this one for example, FP restoration upon bow attacks. If you plan on using a bow, you perfectly can. There are a few bows that actually do scale with Revenant. You can do that. So there are things here that you can get, like FP restoration. Another one here if you plan on using Reaper attacks. So things like that I would look for. I would stick away from the ultimate art gauge. You're not using her alt a ton early on. This is more of an end game stuff. We have one here, Revenant. So there are a few things that you can look for. Colossal weapons, I don't really have a lot of, but you can even get the colossal attacks if you do want the meme weapons. Although, again, I don't really have a ton here. They actually seem pretty rare to find those. And we'll look at some weapons, what scale with it, etc. What kind of tips there, what are going to work with her, and what not. Because there are a ton that won't scale. And for example, we'll go over a few here in the secondary stats. Since we're already here, these also do apply to weapons, at least the ones that you find in-game. But these will also apply to relics. So the ones that don't work are a magic attack power and sorcery power. So if you have those on anything, like you see this one here, physical attack power up, that would work. If you have one that is magic attack power up, that one isn't going to work. Just like this one here, magic attack power up, that one is not going to work with Revenant. Even though she's using seals and incantations, it's not considered a magic power. That also applies to sorcery power, and anything like improved sorceries or anything you find in a game, that will not work. What does work is incantation power, faith scaling, or holy and sacred scaling. Again, we're going to go over that in a little bit. There's also fire and lightning, but that's only if you use those weapons specifically, where magic and sorcery do not work for Revenant's kit. Now jumping over to weapons, as you see we have some weapons here already on my back, and we also have some in our inventory. These actually all scale with faith, which is really nice there. Again, you can always take plus faith if you wanted to. You don't have to do plus FP if you want it on your relics, but these actually do all scale with faith. Now how do you know that? Well, you can't really tell in game. It's not going to tell you. This is exactly the screen you're going to see while you're playing. However, what you can do, instead of heading to Codex, or you can head here, Codex or here, you can actually look in the armaments and see which ones do scale by this key at the bottom here. I don't know what it is on controller, but it is 1 on the keyboard, but the visual codex info, that's going to let you know what scales with faith. So you see here we have Blade of Calling, actually does scale with faith. Now there are a few weapons you can look out for. Again, this is not going to be easy to memorize all of the weapons. There are a ton that do scale with faith, or at least there are way too many to remember, but there are a few mentions here that again will help you when you are looking for faith weapons in game, that will kind of get you to be able to recognize which ones are going to scale and which ones aren't. So some common scaling faith words here are, or at least ones that do scale with faith, are Magnum, which Blade and Whip also do apply there. Golden, if you see Golden, like on this one, the Golden Order Greatsword, this one does scale with faith. In fact, it actually is a C tier with faith, so it's not bad at all. There is the Erd Tree. Pretty much anything with tree in the name is going to scale with faith. Pretty cool there. There are a few extra ones like the Erd Tree Bow. There's the Great Bow and also the Seal there. Of course, the Erd Tree one is going to scale with that. There's Erd Tree Seal. Now for Gargoyle. Gargoyle actually doesn't usually scale with faith, but if you do find a Gargoyle black version or the Halberd, those actually will. So if you see the Gargoyle versions, normal Gargoyles will not. Doesn't matter what Gargoyle that is. Those will actually not scale with faith, but the black version will. So make sure you're finding that one. If you do see Gargoyles black, it does usually scale with that. Also Blasphemous Blade, which again, if these are kind of off-name ones that you can kind of remember here. Blasphemous Blade, this one does scale with faith there. The Envoy's Great Horn also does scale with faith, but that is going to be a D tier. So not the best, but you can utilize this one here. So like you see the Great Horn does have a D in faith scaling, so not too bad as well. There also is something here. If you see a weapon and it says Sacred over it, that will automatically scale with faith. So any weapon that has a pretext where it says Sacred, or even in the middle of the word sometimes, or the middle of the weapon name, that will scale with faith. I believe it can depend on either C or D tier depending on what level it is. I believe that the gray and blue is only D tier, but if it gets to purple, then it will scale at C. Again, sometimes it can matter here, like Staff of the Avatar only has a D tier in faith. It can kind of vary it there, but if you do see Sacred at all in the sword name or in any name regardless of that, that will actually scale with faith. So you should look for weapons with Sacred, Holy, Golden, Gargoyle, Magnum in their name. Those will all scale with faith, and that is actually something you can utilize. So again, Magnum Blade here, it is a D in faith, so not the best, but it is something there. And that is so you don't have to use the starting weapon. I actually don't like to use the starting weapon. I like to mix it up here, so we are utilizing that overall. And you can see that we're utilizing that here. We're using a different weapon. Of course, the best weapon for her class is usually a coated sword. If you see the coated sword, you're really going to want this one. This one scales heavily with faith. It is a S tier. It's one of the only S tier scaling weapons in the game, so you're really going to want to go for one of those as well. Moving on here, we have Incantation. Now, I do have a few that I really do enjoy, and this one first here is the Lancix Glaive. This one's really actually fun to utilize. You can even get out of dodge mechanics here with this one, but you'll see we'll launch up and we cast this down, and it even does AoE damage. So you see we're actually doing some AoE damage to all 3 targets here. It is just so good, especially on your runs, and it even works really well with bosses. There is one better one that I found though, and it actually is fairly common, and it gives you near infinite FP restoration. You'll see if we do swing our sword here, because we do have that relic, we actually do gain FP every 4 to 5 hits. I think it can be dependent on the weapon, but we're actually restoring FP, so we can use seals here. I know some people have struggled with seals, but that is a way to do it. Now, there is one more seal here that I found very common and actually is really good. There's a ton that you can utilize. There's bleed ones that are really good. These are just examples of some that are really decent that you'll find common. This one I found a few times, and it is called Discus of Light. You'll see here just how little of FP we're utilizing, and we get 2 hits on it for 117 each. Again, this is going to scale way higher depending on what seal you have. Right now, this is only a gray scale finger seal. We actually can't increase this, or at least from what I've seen. So Depending on what seal you have here, this is going to scale even higher, but this is really, really good. This is such a good ability. I've used this on boss fights. It does so much damage. You see we even get a double hit here, and look how minimal we're using the FP. You can cast this thing basically forever. You're never going to run out of FP even during a full boss fight, and you could just sit here and cast this as much as you want. You're really not even going to need to use Starlight to regen, as we're doing so much damage here, up to 2,000, 3,000 damage, and we haven't even used at least half a bar of FP right now, almost at 4,000 damage. And again, this isn't scaled high, so this is a really, really good ability. If you do find this, I recommend this for everything. This is great for clearing ads. This is great for clearing bosses, and it's just a really good ability. And it does some really, really good damage. Allows you to stay range, and allows you to also proc your family, which is really good, or at least your summons. Your summons are going to give you some increased damage, so we'll see that here. Now that we have those up, we'll do some increased damage with this. And so we'll go to a different target here so we can kind of see that. And we do get some increased overall to the damage. And that is because of our relic that we're taking, which gives us that increased damage there. And the FP regeneration, which is also really good. So we're even regen FP here if we need to get into melee. And then we can even cast even more of this Discus of Light. Again, there's a ton of seals I'm sure you guys have found that are great. Some of you are watching this video that have played this class. But these are some of the common ones that I found that I think are really good and do pair very well for her class and basically give you infinite sustainability. There are a few changes you could make with the relic system. You could swap out for Knight of the Fathom. The reason being would be if you wanted to have some more co-op features there. There are additional things that you can get, which you do get that one from Augur, and that one does apply plus 100 HP. Flask also splash shield the party, and it's essential for co-op if you want to, if you're not just a solo player, although I don't really utilize that one a ton, but it can pair very well if you do want to get those heals off. There is some timing stuff with that though, and so that's just kind of the way I play. There are different play styles with this, of course, and you can use the colossal weapons. There's a ton of relics that you can swap in and out there, but these are just a starter guide here so that you can kind of get into this class and actually perform. Overall, that's what I covered for today's video. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe. Until the next one, deuce!